Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us today for our Lunch and Learn on sustainable procurement. So briefly going to do some introductions. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kerry Hallard and I'm the Chief Exec of the Global Sourcing Association. And I'm going to be leading and chairing the event today. I'm joined by a couple of colleagues. So Matt Shockley, do you just want to very briefly introduce yourself because you helped the introductions and to facilitate this event. So Matt.
Thanks, Kerry. My name is Matt Shockley. I'm the CEO and founder of Global Sourcing Optimization Services. That is responsible for bringing the startup early stage companies to the Intelligent Automation Exchange this week at the GSA. I'm an ambassador in the Sustainable Procurement Pledge program and delighted to have Thomas speak to us today.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt, and thanks for the introductions. Thomas, please do introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, again, I'm also super happy to be here. Look forward to the conversation. My name is Thomas Juttersen. I'm the CPO, so my day job is I'm with Bayer as the head of procurement. But as an evening passion that is taking more and more time, I have to admit, I'm the co-founder of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge. And you'll hear a little bit more about that, but that's how we can transform the economy and use this 1 million procurement people out there, that they are also starting to get used to using the power that they hold for good.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Right, we want this to be a fully interactive session, so please do put digital hands up or questions in the chat box. There will be dedicated time for discussion at the end as well. So let me now quickly share my screen. And I hope this works. Do let me know when you can see. Are we good?
Yes, we can.
You're good. Looks very nice.
Okay, excellent. Right, what we're going to whiz through today is, would you page down?
Maybe presentation mode. You want to put it in that?
Is it not gone into presentation mode yet? Yay, presentation mode.
All good. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, great stuff. Right, let me just move that to one side. So what we're going to run through today is the work that the GSA has done so far on this subject, so that you can understand why we are fully endorsing the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, but also to bring up to date with the work that we've done so far. So just by way of introduction to myself, I have always been massively behind supporting the environment and sustainability. When I first got the vote as a young girl growing up in Stroud in Gloucestershire, we had a very strong Green Party. So the Green Party got my first vote. I'm quite focused on recycling absolutely everything I can. I've retrained myself, which I'm very proud of, not to print hardly anything anymore. I used to print trees worth of paper when we were office-based, but that has now changed. I do drive a Tesla, and I don't mean to gloat at the moment, but it is quite nice driving a Tesla when there is a huge fuel crisis in the United Kingdom. And the one thing I'm still not very good at is turning the tap off when I'm cleaning my teeth. So my daughter is constantly telling me off. So the youth of today have got it so much better, but you know, I think we're doing some well, I'm personally trying to do some changes. Right, so what we've done at the GSA. So the GSA is entering its 35th year next year. We were set up as the Industry Association and professional body for strategic sourcing, and we are focused on promoting best practice between buyers and service providers for the procurement and the management of global technology and business services programs. So we've been doing that for 35 years, bringing partners together to do better business and to do more business so that we can grow the size of the industry. And right now I can say I think the industry is entering the biggest economic boom it's ever enjoyed, largely due to the fantastic response of partners and professionals around the world in light of the pandemic. So a brief introduction to the GSA. We have for over 20 years been promoting both the professional code of conduct and the corporate code of conduct. And the corporate code of practice rather. So within our individual professional code of conduct, we have been focusing on promoting, you know, the importance of behaviours as a sourcing professional, the importance of developing sourcing professionals, the importance of focusing and supporting your employer and supporting your industry. And of course, within that, the focus on looking after your broader environment. So I'm not going to read all the bullet points here, but for over 20 years, we've constantly been refreshing and changing both our professional code of conduct as well as the corporate code of practice for our industry. But we know we need to do more. So what we've been doing recently is we've launched the GSA Entrepreneurs Club. So the GSA Entrepreneurs Club was launched, it's been in development for well over 12 months, but it was effectively launched in July 2021. And that's because we recognise that the sourcing ecosystem is changing really, really dramatically. And there needs to be a lot more focus on bringing smaller organisations into our memberships ecosystems. So what the Entrepreneurs Club is really focused on doing is helping both the startups and the scale-ups to find companies that they can partner with and to help them understand how best to market themselves to those organisations. But simultaneously, it is also focused on helping enterprise buyers who constantly say to us, we want to do more business with smaller companies, but we just don't know where to find proven companies. So it's to help them find those new partners, but then also help them bring those partners into their sourcing ecosystem. So there are lots of blockers that stop enterprises that want to partner with smaller companies being able to do so. So what we've developed is the GSA's Code of Conduct for partnering with SMEs. And this is looking at helping organisations look at their culture to ensure that they really are transparent, really are focused on win-win, and really understand that there is a different way of actually working with smaller suppliers. They need different people to manage those relationships to ensure that they move so much more quickly with these smaller suppliers. Within that, we are pushing for organisations to shorten their RFPs. Lengthy RFPs with really long lists are really damaging and detrimental to the success and even the survival of smaller organisations. So we are helping our enterprise buyers look at changing their RFP process and changing their due diligence. Again, the due diligence is a massive blocker to stop smaller organisations partnering with our enterprise buyers. And also the contracting. Contracts of 140 pages really should be put in the bin, and we really do need to be focused on much more simplified contracts that, again, bring the inclusion of smaller players into the ecosystem. So we've developed and we're promoting this SME Code of Conduct, and we're running Entrepreneur Clubs events on a monthly basis, picking out different aspects of this sort of content. Then, in the process of developing the Entrepreneurs Club, I found myself having so many conversations with other like-minded people that were really, really passionate about bringing supplier diversity into the UK in a much stronger way. So from those conversations, that gave birth to the Council for Supplier Diversity UK. We believe we're completely unique in what we're doing because we're focused on helping organisations understand what supplier diversity looks like and understand how to build a diverse supply chain. And we actually are unique in that we represent every type of diversity. So this isn't just focused on the smaller organisations, it's also looking at ethnic minority-owned organisations, disability-run organisations, veteran-run organisations, and women-owned organisations. So we are working on a constant basis to try and develop the best practice for how UK businesses, and there's loads of best practice in the States, there's not the same best practice, it's not a lift and shift for the best practice that we can develop for building supplier diversity in the UK. So these are our objectives. We are trying to get to a common definition of supplier diversity. We are trying to build the best practice of how to start. We're trying to understand the data sets of what a diverse supply chain looks like. So speaking to some of the members, it's just like, wow, yeah, we know exactly what our supplier diversity looks like, but we don't know whether that's any good. So, you know, citing examples, one of the energy providers said we've got 52% of our spend with SMEs. But is that a good percentage of spend or is that a bad percentage of spend? So what we're trying to do is create the data sets that everyone can then benchmark their own performance against. And ultimately, our ultimate objective is for a clear supply diversity framework to become policy across the UK. So I'm whistling through this very quickly because I really want to make sure there's plenty of time for Thomas, but I just want to give you guys a backdrop to the sort of work that we've been doing here at the GSA. So this is the structure of the work of the SD UK. We have currently got, these are my fellow founding members, so a big shout out to those guys there, Sarah Ahmed, Frida Gibbs and Sunita Hirani. So we have got a team of fantastically engaged professionals that are focused on helping us develop the work. We've got 3 active work streams at the moment. Kicking it off, which is chaired by Crystal Sands from Facebook, and that's looking at how do you actually start on your supplier diversity journey and all the best practices. And that's supported by Daniel and Natasha at Legal & General. Then we've got the data and technology stream, which is looking at that benchmark data, but all the different technologies that are out there to actually support developing supplier diversity. That's being chaired by Andy Horn at IBM, supported by Lindsay at the Cabinet Office. And then we've got a collaboration work stream that looks at all the other entities out there, like MSD UK, like WeConnect, like Veterans UK and Out Britain, that are people that we should be collaborating with to help our organisations find those diverse suppliers. And that's been led by Peter Zerp from Accenture. So I'm putting this up because we've got a call out to actually bring more and more people into the council. So anybody that wants to get involved, roll their sleeves up and help us work on these work streams, please do get in touch. You know, we are actively enrolling more support. So that's that on the SD UK. And the last couple of slides I just want to bring to your attention is we're not just doing this all nationally. So when the pandemic hit, we saw there being a huge opportunity for us to look at the industry's futures from a global perspective, to support the industry, to celebrate the industry in its response to the pandemic, but to create a very clear vision for the future of the global technology and business services industry. So we reached out to like-minded industry associations around the world, asked them if they wanted to collaborate. They did, and that gave birth to the Global Technology and Business Services Council, which is an alliance of 12 of the leading technology and business services industries associations from around the world. And we've been pushing a global agenda. So we've been pushing a global agenda on impact sourcing, how important impact sourcing is, and how we all have we all have a responsibility to look at ensuring that work is fully inclusive all around the world, and how we can actively do that, and the benefits from actually doing that. So it's not just a charitable initiative, it really is focused on driving inclusive economic growth and poverty reduction. So we've been pushing an impact sourcing agenda, and we have a clear programme of work that we are working to, and that is set targets for change across the world in the uptake of impact sourcing. And we've also been doing a lot of work, and we continue to do a lot of work on the subject of responsible automation and what the future of work actually looks like. So we know that roles are being changed, displaced as a result of automation, but there's no reason for people to be left by the wayside. So we're doing a programme of work that looks at massive reskilling and upskilling of the workforce to ensure, sustainability in their careers. So it's a whistle-stop tour of everything that the GSA has been doing alongside with the Global Technology and Business Services Council, and why we are fully supportive of the work of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge. Our work is purely that of Global Technology and Business Services. Obviously, the work of the SPP is much, much broader than that. So with that, I'm going to actually hand on over to Thomas, and I'm going to stop sharing.
All right, let's see if I can get this share screen all going. You should see a nice little seedling on its way towards maturity. Is that true? Is that what you see?
Yes, we got it.
All right, good. So again, I mean, it's such a unique and a fine group that you allow me to come and share a couple of perspectives. I mean, thanks a lot. I know this is a group that has also a lot of history together. So I hope I will be able to, in a way, maybe inspire you and share some thoughts that is also helpful for you. I heard it's a lunch and learn. So I guess in my assumption, I'm gonna try to go through at a high level some of the material, and then if you have a question, you just stop me. Whenever there is something you wanna maybe go deeper, if that's something of interest to any of you, then maybe if we can agree, that's the principle. So I will keep it quite high, and then if you want to go down, you raise your hand, and then I can see that I think on the screen somewhere. I'm not sure exactly, but we'll. If I don't see it, Carrie, then you can let me know that there's very good. So anyway, I'm talking about sustainable procurement, people, planet, profit. So with that also, of course, outlining both the environmental, the social, and the economic dimension. So that's in a way the way that we look at procurement. It's those three dimensions, and they of course needs to work in harmony. I think very few of you are doubting this. In fact, thankfully, fewer people on the planet are doubting that we are in a situation where we as a species, humanity, we are overstepping all the planetary boundaries, which is of course a problem that needs to be addressed. We see that on multiple dimensions, but I guess the major two ones is the climate impact. You all see that in your news channels. You've seen that over the summer, flooding, fires, I mean, on and on. But of course, we also see that in the loss of biodiversity, and some of the facts that you get from variable reports are quite sobering, whether it's in the oceans, whether it's the degradation of arable land, or whether it's deforestation. So there is a challenge for us to have, which is then even being compounded by sort of a geopolitical landscape, which is not as business friendly as it used to be. We've had to deal with trade wars, regulatory restrictions, which really hasn't been part of the globalization, the way business has been conducted over the last couple of decades. So we need to deal with all of those, and that raises a need for us to maybe revisit how we do things. This year, I think for all of us has been painful. It's both been painful and humbling. Most of us have had some degree of loss. But I also think 2020 will go down in history as the year where we actually paused. We did reflect on some of the practices that we had prior to 2020. And the fact we can have calls like this, the fact that we've been able to keep business going in a virtual setting has of course proven that many of these assumptions that we had been operating on, how we work, how do we deal with each other, how do we collaborate, were outdated and wrong. So thankfully, we have had the benefit of technology getting us through the last 18 months. But I do think that many of us have real lessons that we can take out of the experiences the last 18 months. And in a way, that's the least we should be doing also to the many people who have had this different degrees of loss throughout the last 18 months. And one of the big decisions that all businesses will have to take, we all have different businesses. We have very specific, unique challenges, but there is some uniformity around, what is it that we are going to do, and how is it that we are going to operate on these two dimensions around the financial targets of how do we, of course, reward our investors, our shareholders, but also the sustainability targets of how do we make sure that our role in society around sustainability, to which extent is that being merged into who we are and how we operate. And you still have some companies on the very left who think, I'm here to make money, my shareholders happy, so that's it. And then you have on the right side B Corp, an increasing number of organizations who says, I'm here for a purpose, and of course I need to have a return in order to pay salaries and keep their lights on. But it's really for the purpose. And most organizations are, of course, somewhere in between. Corporate contributor is staying just above what our regulators are expecting. Society whilst impact generators are clearly made a conscious choice that we will include sustainability objectives, our role in society, as a strategic differentiator that influences products, services, and how you run your shop. And the good news is the trend is going right. Very few people on the left, most young people coming out of universities anyway, don't want to work for companies like that. So, over time, that will probably solve itself. What is also very helpful is that the normality, there's a naming convention linked to the UN SDGs, which makes it more easy for organizations to compare how am I doing versus my peers, versus my competitors. And it also brings transparency and simplicity into how you run organizations. And just as an example, because I do think I'm very lucky that I work for a company that actually gets this, that is working on some of the biggest challenges. How do we go from 7.8 billion people to 10 billion people, make sure they are healthy, they have enough food to eat? And we have to do that without compromising our sustainability profile, the planetary boundaries. So we see that as the biggest challenge. It's health for all, hunger for none is the vision of Bayer. And what I just want to show is sustainability is, of course, an integral part. Sustainability in terms of the carbon footprint, so more on the environmental, but also on others. We've signed the Science-Based Target Initiative. Maybe many of you are familiar, but that, of course, really starts putting some tangible targets in the system when it comes to your footprint, both internally, so scope 1 and 2, energy, fleet, travel, etc., processing, as well as external, so scope 3. And that's where, of course, procurement has a very, very large role to play. Most manufacturing organizations have around 80 to 85% of their CO2 footprint in scope 3, which means all the services and products that you are buying. The only thing I want to say with this slide is this is a lot of work and it takes a long time. So of course, a call out to the organizations that really hasn't started yet. Don't think you can fix this overnight. And as we are all moving towards 2030, we have 9 years still to go. There's a bit of urgency on the system so that we are also able to meet these joint challenges. Whilst we were one of the first companies who signed the UN Global Compact principles 2 decades ago, we were also one of the first companies who publicly embraced the notion that we are not competing on our sustainable supply chains. We have to collaborate. It's total waste of time to have everybody going to the poor suppliers asking for pretty much the same questions with different variants. We pacify our supply chain. They get bogged down in administration rather than actually getting stuff done. So we launched 2 industry initiatives, Together for Sustainability for the chemical industry and PSCI for the pharmaceutical, where the ingoing assumption is an audit for one is an audit for all. So we are sharing all this information across the industry. Of course, antitrust boundaries, nobody knows who is doing business with whom. But we have grown TFS from 6 members back in 2011 to 31 members. We have global representation. And at this moment in time, the buying power of this group is more than 250 billion. And we are monitoring all the time 10,000 suppliers across the world. So with collaboration, you can have a completely different impact that you can do on your own. And the only thing I want to say with the sustainability strategy that was introduced also by Bayer in 2019, sort of building on previous work, was we have now made the compensation of all our leaders dependent on our sustainability profile. So all the bonuses, the way they're calculated, are of course linked with your financial objectives, but also your sustainability objectives. So just another way of walking the talk and not just having nice glossy magazines, but actually making sure that we all feel if we succeed, but we also feel if we fail. One point, because this is of course linked, and many of you are probably aware, right now we are experiencing a historic high in terms of disruptions. It's even worse than Corona. There is just disruption everywhere. All supply chains are in a way hampered right now. I think UK, you see that with fuel, but whether it's timber, whether it is the excipients coming from China shutting down most of the manufacturing sites, it's really, really significant, and that is going on. But what we saw as Bayer during the COVID was, even though we have 300 manufacturing sites all around the world, none of them were down because of material shortages. And why is that? We believe it's because we have invested decades into having long-term relationships. We invest time, commitment, we build capabilities together with our suppliers. We focus on innovation, not getting hung up about all the old ways we used the old way we used to do things, but really start exploring what is possible and do that in a trustful and transparent way. And with that, we saw that the investment that we have been doing into sustainability carried an enormous reward when it came to resilience. And when you have friends, sometimes you say thank you. And that's exactly what we also did over the Corona time. We introduced some impromptu virtual recognition awards, Stronger Together, where we really wanted to also say thanks to these companies who went above and beyond. And somehow, despite all the different regulatory constraints which different countries introduced around PPE and what have you, somehow we still managed to keep the lights on. And for us, as you can maybe appreciate, we are into life-saving medicine. So if our supply chains break down, people suffer. But also, as we are in seeds, it also means that the seeds don't go in the soil, which of course has consequences on the ability to feed the population. And as a sober reminder, tonight 650 million people are estimated to go to bed without enough food in their stomach. So we may not see that these days, that there is a big problem around feeding the planet. But if you go further south, you will be unfortunately reminded that this is a real problem that we have to deal with as humanity. Just in terms of implications on business to business, that's where, of course, I'm active. I do see big changes on product portfolios. There's going to be much more expectations around green innovations, whether it's bio-based materials or circular business models. That is, all of the above. But what will also start to happen as more companies have signed up for the Science-Based Target Initiative, where you really have a CO2 ceiling over the next couple of years, quite aggressive decline. CO2 in a way becomes a currency, and that will also need to have a big impact on how do you make decisions. So it's not just price and quality and time and all that. Carbon is becoming a very, very legitimate player. And you could see that expanding, human rights, etc., as time progresses. So these externalities, which has been hidden a bit in the past, will, of course, start to carry a value, and we need to learn how to deal with that. Supply chains are going to be re-engineered. They have to. Sustainable procurement will have to become the norm, and not just for your tier one, which is the people you talk to, and you may have some degree of oversight. But expectations are that you start having clarity around tier 2, tier 3. And that's, of course, not going to happen in direct interaction. That's where technology partners, startups become really, really critical. How do you have sufficient oversight to also guarantee that you have responsible supply chains? Production is going to be driven through efficiencies into zero impact, or as close to zero impact as possible. Disruptions, bad news, is not likely to go down. We see, I guess, weather-dependent disruptions, but also economic, political disruptions is on the rise, regulatory disruptions. So, we have to be much better at building that resiliency into our supply chains. And to do that, people have to get used to collaborating in different ways. Some of the silos that you have seen, I guess, within companies and between companies and between other societal players, those silos will have to come down because we have a problem and we need to work together. Relationships, much more around longer term relationships. Buyers, procurement people, but also sales organizations will have to choose who is it that I actually want to work with, who do I believe have the right mindset and the probability of success in the future, so that you can create ecosystems. That requires investment into capabilities, eliminating a lot of the complexity that today sits between all these interfaces between constituents, And that's not going to happen unless you have a different approach towards transparency and that you have trust. And that is very much linked with the type of behaviors that are then seen between companies. Can you walk the talk and also be there for the other when the going gets tough? That's going to be the acid test. And companies who learn how to do that successfully are also the ones that I'm convinced will be succeeding here long term. And if we now bump that up to the macro level, the challenge is quite intimidating and quite enormous. So we are in a way trying to change an existing capitalist system towards one that is much more responsible and integrated and sustainable. And for that system change to happen, I think the biggest change management initiative in, I guess, recent history of our species, there's at least 3 constituents that have to work hand in hand. It's all the innovators, the people with great ideas who actually can come with sustainable solutions, whether it's bio-based, less dependent on fossil fuel, renewables, circular economy. That group needs to be supported in making sure that their ideas are getting stronger. Good news is we have a lot of clever people. A lot of the solutions are already there. Sad news is that it's sitting in the drawers and it's not moving. And there are reasons for that. One is that the regulatory parties, whether it's at a local level, government, or also at a more international level, have not really figured out how to create a system that is rewarding good behavior and punishing bad behavior. Some attempts in different countries are happening. But of course, if it's only looked at from a particular country perspective, in UK it's modern slavery, in Germany it's something else, and the Dutch have a different idea, and then the Americans are coming. If you want to run global supply chains, it's a total nightmare because everybody will be filling in questionnaires rather than actually having an impact. So the request and the hope we have is, of course, that we can elevate these type of conversations to agree on standards, making sure that the principles that already exist under the UN Global Compact, that they get also legally enforceable, and that we, instead of creating an administrative nightmare, we actually start looking at how do we create a system that really, again, enforces the right behavior and stops the wrong one. But that's not enough. If the markets doesn't buy these wonderful ideas that are being presented to them, if we are not prepared to change our behavior, we will never reach that economies of scale that is required for these ideas also to flourish. And that's where you and I as individuals become really important. This requires that we also prepare to make some personal changes. And I think, Carrie, you mentioned, we all are doing, our very best, and that is good. But I think we all recognize that it's probably not enough. So that's a continuous journey. Likewise, companies, the 1 million procurement people who is today controlling 8.3 trillion trade, business to business, I also have to start operating differently. They have to start looking at the environmental and the social footprint of the products and the services that they are buying. We need to do even more around these multi-stakeholders initiatives like RSPO for palm oil, where different societal interests are coming in saying, how do we address this collaboratively rather than throwing mud at each other and trying to figure out who is to blame most, not particular. We need transparency. So trade, things like fair trade, that of course shows that a certain product carries a certain characteristic that has a certain principle, values associated with it. These are all helpful in making sure we make better choices. And I mentioned Together for Sustainability, which is around industry collaboration. Instead of competing on our supply chains, we need to collaborate. We will compete with our end products, and we will make sure that it all happens within the guardrails of antitrust legislation, but it's not the area where we will be competing when it's about the responsible practices across our joint supply chains. And this is a bit where it was a long way to get to what Carrie was so happy to, and I'm thankful for that, to talk about. It's the Sustainable Procurement Pledge. So that's something we launched 2 years ago, inspired by David Attenborough. We saw a documentary where he, in a way, asked the question, how can it be this amazingly smart species is really so actively about to destroy our only one home? So we thought, that's a good question, and we should probably be doing it something different. But we then talked to a lot of procurement practitioners that we see, and we learned that even though 15,000 companies today have signed up for the UN Global Compact, when you talk to people who is already in tune with sustainability, more than 50% say, this is not really what is happening. I'm not resourced. My boss actually doesn't really want me to work on this, and we have other priorities. It's all about squeezing costs. So I like it, but I'm not getting the support to do that. And we said, let's then find a way for these individuals to stand up for some professional principles that they want to believe in, and then start creating a change bottom up. So most of us have day jobs. We will, of course, do our top down, making sure that these practices are embedded into our jobs. But we are also now going to make sure that this 1 million people out there who doesn't enjoy a great company or a boss who understands this, that they have access to knowledge, they have access to a community where they can also feel safe, and they can ask questions of how do I actually fix this problem? And the principles are linked with the United Nations Global Compact. In addition, it's about this standing up for people and planet, and making sure that it's going to happen together. So the African proverb, if you want to move fast, you go on your own. If you want to move far, you go together. That very much applies. And we don't wait for anybody to solve our problem. We start with ourselves. We start now. It's by sharing knowledge, because there's plenty of knowledge. It's not a problem. It's just that there is a asymmetry between the people who have the knowledge and the ones who need that. And that's what we are going to do. We are going to make this available as a charity, a non-profit, for everybody for free, making sure that that knowledge is being disseminated. And why? Because when in a couple of decades we sit there and look back, and the question is asked, where were you when this challenge was put upon the world? We want to say that procurement absolutely was part of the solution, and that we found ways to also overcome the challenge that we are all facing. So it's about the right legacy of procurement. And since we launched 2 years ago, quite a few things have happened. We are now around 5,000 ambassadors from 142 countries. We have a website where there's a lot of engagement. We have webinars that are super big. And we see, when we ask our ambassadors, what is this helping you make better decisions? In our regular surveys, we see that 73% are also saying, you know what, I'm actually making better decisions that are more responsible moving forward. But 5,000 now, 1 million by 2030, we obviously have a lot of work ahead of us. So we want to do that by deploying this strategy, where we are fixing the gaps, closing the gaps that exist, one around knowledge, one around support, the leadership dimension, where certainly we do not have sufficient engagement at different levels of leadership. And with that, also giving the practitioners, the frontline staff who makes everyday decisions for this 8.3 trillion that we are dealing, all those handshakes, that they also prepare to start the first steps. We call the strategy Empower and Equip, which is looking at the practitioners, and then encourage leadership, which is of course the ones who at the end of the day have to endorse it, provide mandate, provide the funding, the direction to also do what is right. And the strategy, the roadmap that we have defined looks pretty much like this. We are now launching chapters across geographies, across industries, across topics. And with that, our volunteer community of co-chairs is making sure that there are very local and relevant conversations taking place, that the peer-to-peer sharing is facilitated, and that it's for procurement, by procurement, that we can also talk with our ambassadors rather than talking at our ambassadors. And that's really the journey we are on, deploying this plan. We are very happy about the progress that we have seen from all these ambassadors. Lots of companies also seeing this as a very pragmatic way of building the bottom up to meet the top-down aspirations. If you look at the logo, you can maybe see it's a yin and yang, it's top down, bottom up, and that's of course the spirit. Good news, lots of interest, enormously high ambitions. Bad news is that we still have 0 on our bank account. So, we are of course also looking for ways that we can support such a roadmap, because we are great procurement practitioners. We know how to fix this. We are not particularly good at fundraising. So if any of you, know some of that, then let me know. Yeah, and I think that is really the essence here. I think it's the uncle of Spider-Man who said that with great power comes great responsibility, and that's what we also believe in procurement, in SPP, that there is a enormous power that does exist, and we just need to make sure that we get into the hearts of this 1 million practitioners who are making decisions, that they are supported on this change journey, and that they are given the encouragement and confidence to actually start doing things differently. I don't think I left so many chances for you to ask questions, so that was super fast. If you are interested, we have the website spp.earth. We are on LinkedIn, that's where all the ambassadors hang out. So if any of you are interested, you're very welcome to join.
Okay, that was awesome. Thank you very much, Thomas. We do have one question in the box, so I'm going to go to the box questions first, but I've got a number of questions for you anyway. So Chan has asked, can you expand a little bit on the technology list? What does this address?
The technology list is one that we have made available on spp.earth. So it came out of one of these conversations with our ambassadors where they say, wow, all these startups are coming and they're all these new cool players. We don't know who they all are. Can you help us sort of curate a list of what is possible? And that's what we have done. So we've gone into hibernation, looked at everybody who is in a technology solution that solves certain aspects of sustainable procurement, and we have made them publicly available. So that's captured on spp.earth. And we are of course seeing that this curating content, again for free, without any commercial interest whatsoever, is relevant in also things like education, like consultancy, etc. So that's our ambassador said we have a problem, we see a gap, and we try to fix it.
Okay, hopefully that answers that question, Jan. Okay, a question from M. Flores. What are the changes in the operating model of the function you expect you're getting ready to create? Sorry, you expect you're getting ready to create the impact required on sustainability? Have you got that question?
Yes, it's nice to hear you again. So I think, again, we are looking at it from a bottom-up perspective when it comes to SPP. So I think the knowledge that is required should work in any sort of operating model that exists out there. So whilst there are great companies and consultancies who help advise on how do you structure this, our focus is how do we give the individual the capability to question some of their practices and the confidence to go to their management and maybe also the vocabulary to say, this is not good enough, you got to change that. So we are not focusing on operating models, we are focusing on how do we practically engage with our suppliers, with our colleagues, and getting from unsustainable fossil-based type of solutions to more socially responsible, less exclusive type of settings. That is a focus. We don't try to boil the ocean. We are bottom up. We don't want to eat anybody's lunch. There are other people who focus on operating models. We focus on the individual. Okay,
thank you. So I'm really interested to understand some more tangible metrics behind the pledge. So yeah, I see your ambition to get 1 million people on board by 2030, but what are the tangible metrics of change you're going to be measuring to see that the pledge has actually driven change and delivered?
I mean, we've had a couple of surveys so far, and what we think we can start with is this metric. Does it help? Are you making better decisions? And we would, of course, like to see that this is in a way that is also removing whatever degree of bias that may exist. So the question is it helping? Are you making better decisions? Then I think also towards the community itself, question is, are we meeting the expectations? You know, can you say that we have been able to deliver on what you were hoping to achieve? And that is very high at this stage when we ask, it's 95%, you know, you meet or exceed expectations. So I think those are the aspects that we will be able to measure as SPP. Now, the real impact of those millions of decisions which will happen, we will see in our top-down metrics. That will be reflected in, you know, does the Bayer metrics, you know, actually happen vis-a-vis the Science-Based Target Initiative, all the companies that are there. We have public procurement. You know, do we see that the public procurement group is starting to have much stronger mandates around sustainability, or will governments still accept that, you know, they are having this happening under their own nose? I mean, there's a lot that we can see in the top down, but that's not what we are focusing on. Again, we look at the individual. Do they have the knowledge that they need to drive that change?
Okay, when you look at the individual, do you think that the industry associations out there, so the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, are doing enough to train new qualified professionals in procurement on the sustainability challenges? Is there something more we should be doing?
I think there's definitely a need for much more capability building, and that it reaches parts of the global supply chains which we historically have not had an access to. So I think you know, Malcolm and the SIPS team, you know, they're doing an amazing job in also having chapters globally, where of course there is a infrastructure that we are also collaborating with. So we are thankful also for the collaboration with SIPS. We do see though that of course that doesn't reach everybody. The lone procurement purchaser sitting in the middle of Turkey, you know, does not have access to a fully fledged SIPS certification program as it stands. And that's where we think this almost democratization of the knowledge, digitally enabled, but also through chapters, gives us a chance to get those people, because that's where, you know, 80% of the carbon impact of our global supply chains sit. It sits with those small, medium-sized companies that, you know, would never have access to the nice programs which many are offering, either with a small fee or, you know, with a large fee.
Okay, staying on this whole subject of the professional and professional development. So what would you say, and where would you point people that are just beginning to embark upon this journey, or really want to strengthen the base program that they've got quickly? Where would you point them to? What tips would you give them, you know, to really get this started? And then the second part of, let's do that question first and we'll come back, because if not, we'll confuse us.
I mean, that was the first type of questions that we had when we came together also 2 years ago, you know, almost the do's and the don'ts. What are the experiences? We facilitated webinars where we ask also the ambassadors, you know, what is the knowledge that you can share? And we collected all of that and curated that. So that's actually available on spp.earth. So if you go, you see the big challenges. How do I speak to my boss? Where do I start? What are the meaningful metrics? All those questions, which are trigger points to, I guess, get going, have been answered there on the website. And again, we don't want to create new knowledge. There's plenty of knowledge, and there are many, thankfully, that are providing content, experiences that we can share. So we're trying to have it available on that digital platform. And as I mentioned, we are now launching chapters. So for example, UK is launching. Many countries are having, we have topics like human rights, supplier diversity, you mentioned that earlier, but also we have industries, the electronics industry, the automotive, and those 3 dimensions will then be the framework where people can enter this world, where they can see, I'm in an industry, I'm in a country, I have an issue, and they can find generated answers by fellow ambassadors.
Right. Dovetails into what my second question was going to be, and that is, what is your immediate advice to a professional that feels that their stakeholders are really blocking this? Is there any, you know, fast fast tips? You're very lucky to be working for an organisation that is really embracing it and driving the change, but not everybody is so lucky.
Yeah, I think it's to have an impact, I guess you need to know what you are talking about. And I think building the vocabulary, understanding what are the trade-offs, why is this a great investment into the future? It's not helpful talking about cost. This is about a sort of prerequisite for a license to operate in the future. And having that self-education triggered also by conversations with peers, seeing that there are other people who had the same doubt and fell on their nose and got up. And I think that is what you need to do, and not blame it on the stakeholders, because most people, when you explain it in a language that they understand, get this. So educate yourself, have the conversation. And if you're really running into a stone wall where there is a leader who just absolutely doesn't get this, run like mad. Find somebody else that will value your passion for doing the right thing, and hopefully then these companies that don't get it, these managers, will eventually be found out, and we're all in a better place by then.
Okay. Right, our industry from the GSA is predominantly focused on global technology and business services. So whether that's cloud, IT infrastructure, software development, customer service delivery, or business processing, it's usually very complex long-term service arrangements. Now, you mentioned both Together for Sustainability and also the PSCI.
Yeah.
So in the work that you've done across bio and pharmaceuticals, or chemicals and pharmaceuticals, have you measured the performance of the sustainability of technology and business service providers? Are they included within the work that you've done? And then my next question, which I'm really interested to get your view on, do you think there's a role for the GSA or the Global Technology and Business Services Council to play in actually creating a sustainability index for the performance of the service provider community?
So I think the short answer is yes and yes. So we are looking at all supply partners that are part of the infrastructure as all member companies in Together for Sustainability, as an example. That of course looks at all the excipients, all the direct materials, but also the different service providers. And maybe CO2 is not the biggest and most relevant dimension here, but it's maybe human rights. It's about other dimensions, the diversity that becomes more critical. So we also have assessment and audits of our service providers. Our expectations are exactly the same. For example, if you are below EcoVadis score 45, we need to have a very honest conversation. And if you have any ambition of being a strategic and integrated partner, you've got to be north of that. You have to be green. And if you don't, we will bump you down from business class to economy. And if you still don't want to make any improvements where we see you have gaps versus the expectations, next time the plane takes off, chances are that you are not on that one. So that goes for our materials as well as our service providers. But I think you have a much more exciting role to play, because many of you are, of course, the extended partners of our supply chains, of our operations, procurement. You are acting on our behalf with different degree of activities, whether it's even sourcing or whether it's the whole purchase to pay activities. And I think here there are also very clear roles that you can have towards the suppliers, that they are having a adherence to those principles, that you're also helping to monitor to which extent do they actually play along the path or not. So I think there's one, how do you operate yourself? But maybe much more impactful is how do you help accelerate the message that all these suppliers that you have interfaces with, that they also start driving this system change.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've put my email address in the box. So anybody that's interested in discussing what the role should be in developing a service provider sustainability index, how we do it, and how we release it and how we publish it, please do get in touch and have your say. So so there's my email. Really pleased to hear from you. Okay, are there any final questions for Thomas? Because we've only got a couple of minutes left.
Got a couple of minutes. One thing I maybe want to say, because you mentioned all the contracts up in the beginning, right? You said there's some 140 pages contracts, which sounds dreadful, right? But one of the things that we have also uncovered as we are starting this SPP journey, and we are saying let's use our power for good. You know, some amazing organizations are popping up, and I think we learned that there is so much available in terms of knowledge out there for free. So again, it's just really a question of connecting it. And one super exciting thing is the Chancery project, which is UK based. I think it's 71 lawyers who have set themselves together and said, how can we make sure that we make contract clauses available to the public for good? That includes different aspects around sustainability. You know, how could you put that into your standard terms and conditions? And you can check the website. It's called the Chancery Project. 71 clauses available for free. Download them and start using that, because that's of course I hope it's less than with this already in your 140 pages, but at least there are ways that you can actually get access to some amazing content for free.
That is brilliant. So perhaps we'll put that in the chat as well, if Abby, you could do that, or send it out to people after the call. So my very last question is, what is the reality of us being able to see the sustainability? I mean, how many levels down in the supply chain? So if we look at the sustainability of our service providers, who obviously are then using different cloud providers, and those cloud providers have different data centers using bricks from different brick manufacturers. How realistic is it that we can actually map sustainability that far?
I think with the 100% accuracy, it's an illusion. Not going to happen. Just do some quick math. I have 60,000 suppliers in Bayer's supply chain. They all do business with 5,000. I mean, you're easily in the hundreds of millions. That's not going to happen with total accuracy, 100%. But it doesn't prevent you from having risk-based approaches, where of course you're looking at what is critical, where do you see certain risks. I think a lot of those startup technology providers are very, very interesting, where they start looking at data lakes, where they can also listen to what it is that is happening on the internet, where people make comments. So I think we will be able to complement it to a good enough level by taking it seriously, investing resources, adopting technology, and being prepared to act. Then I think we are there. But let's not kid ourselves. There is no way that I can sit here and guarantee 3 levels into a factory in the middle of India that a person doesn't say something that's wrong. That's not a reality. So we should be realistic and appreciate the challenge we all have.
Yeah, so without meaning to use an inappropriate pun on this discussion of sustainability and climates, but we can't boil the ocean overnight, can we? So,
we don't want to, yeah.
One step at a time. So thank you so much for joining us, Thomas.
Thank you, everybody
else for joining us. And I really hope you guys will look at the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, sign up to it, share the conversation and the links with your colleagues as well. And then of course, please do get in touch with me about the role of the GSA for sustainability across our community. So thank you.
Some of you are ambassadors already, so it's great to see you. So thanks for that.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Thanks for joining us. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.